The Galactic Academy of Sciences stood as a monument to interspecies cooperation. Its crystalline walls reflected the light of 3 suns, and inside, beings from 100 different worlds gathered to learn. In classroom 47B, Professor Zixtar adjusted his 4 optical stalks nervously as students filed in for advanced xenobiology. Marcus Chen sat in the back row, the only human in a sea of aliens. He slouched in his reinforced chair, one designed to handle his species' unusual density. While most students carried data tablets made of light-weave technology, Marcus had an old-fashioned notebook and a mechanical pencil. The other students gave him a wide berth, as they always did. The Velkari student next to him shifted her crystalline form away slightly. Marcus noticed, but said nothing. He was used to it by now. 3 months at the academy, and he was still the curiosity, the oddity, the Deathworlder. Professor Zixtar's translator buzzed to life. Today we study apex predators across the galaxy. Please observe the holographic displays. The air shimmered, and 3-dimensional images of various creatures appeared. A Thrakan blood beast, all fangs and armor. A Zelanian mind ripper with its psychic tendrils, each more terrifying than the last. Marcus doodled in his notebook, drawing a house cat from Earth. He smiled at the memory of his pet back home. The door to the classroom hissed open. Every head turned, and the temperature seemed to drop several degrees. A figure stood in the doorway, tall and imposing. It wore the black environmental suit of the Carathian Empire, its face hidden behind a reflective visor. Professor Zixtar's optical stalks retracted in fear. You cannot be here. This is a neutral zone. The Carathian Empire has no authority. The figure raised a weapon, sleek and deadly. The classroom erupted in panic. Students scrambled over each other, their various forms of locomotion creating chaos. The Velkari girl began to emit high-pitched crystalline chimes of terror. A gelatinous Borth student literally melted into a puddle of fear. Marcus looked up from his doodle and sighed. Not again. The Carathian spoke, its voice a mechanical rasp through the translator. I am Executor Krex. I have come for the human. The weapon swung toward Marcus. You will come with me, Deathworlder. The Empire has questions about your species' military capabilities. The classroom fell silent, except for the whimpering of terrified students. All eyes turned to Marcus, expecting him to cower, to beg, to show the fear that gripped them all. Instead, Marcus Chen laughed. It wasn't a nervous laugh or a laugh of hysteria. It was genuine, deep, and surprisingly warm. He set down his pencil and stood up, stretching like he'd just woken from a pleasant nap. Executor Krex, right? Marcus said, walking down the aisle between desks. Students pressed themselves against walls to avoid being near him. That's a pretty impressive title. Let me guess, you're what? Some kind of special forces? Elite assassin? The Carathian's weapon tracked Marcus's movement. Stay where you are, human. I am authorized to use force. Marcus kept walking. See, here's the thing about that weapon you're holding. It's a plasma caster, right? Mark 7, if I'm not mistaken. Good choice. Reliable. Decent range, minimal recoil. He spoke casually, like discussing the weather. The problem is it's designed for use against silicon-based life forms. The frequency modulation is all wrong for carbon-based targets. The executor's stance shifted slightly. Uncertainty. Now you could still hurt me with it, Marcus continued, now only 10 feet from the Carathian. Might even leave a nasty burn. But kill me? Unlikely. See, humans are weird like that. We're mostly water. Your plasma bolt would cause some surface damage, lots of steam, very dramatic. But our bodies are surprisingly good at dispersing that kind of energy. You lie, Krex hissed, but the weapon wavered slightly. Marcus grinned. Maybe. Want to test it? Because here's what happens next if you pull that trigger. Best case scenario for you, you hurt me, make me angry. And then you get to find out why my species is classified as Deathworlders. He cracked his knuckles, the sound sharp in the quiet room. Worst case scenario? You miss. I close the distance and we dance. The classroom held its collective breath. Professor Zixtar had hidden under his desk, only his trembling eye stalks visible. The other students watched in horrified fascination. You know what the funny thing is? Marcus said, taking another step forward. You walked into a classroom full of students to threaten me. Do you have any idea how that looks to a human? We have a word for people who threaten kids. Several words, actually. None of them polite. The Carathian's visor turned slightly, taking in the cowering students. They are not children. They are adult specimens of their species. Yeah, but they're students. They're here to learn to better themselves, and you're scaring them. Marcus's voice hardened. I don't like bullies, Crex. The weapon steadied. Enough talk. You will comply or... Marcus moved. To the watching aliens, it was as if he had teleported. One moment he was standing still, the next he had closed the distance and wrapped his hand around the barrel of the plasma caster. The weapon discharged, the bolt sizzling past Marcus's ear and burning a hole in the classroom ceiling. Too slow, Marcus said conversationally. With his free hand, he grabbed the Carathian's wrist and squeezed. There was a sound like breaking chalk as the alien's bones compressed. The weapon clattered to the floor. Executor Crex made a sound that the translator couldn't process, somewhere between a scream and a whistle. Marcus maintained his grip, using just enough pressure to cause pain, but not permanent damage. Here's what's going to happen, Marcus said. You're going to walk out of here. You're going to tell your empire that the human is off limits. And you're going to think very carefully about coming after me or anyone in this classroom again. Understood? The Carathian nodded frantically. Marcus released him, and Crex stumbled backward, cradling his injured wrist. Oh, and Crex, Marcus called as the executor reached the door. Next time you want to talk to me, make an appointment. Professor Zixtar runs a tight ship here, and I'd hate to miss any more of his lecture on apex predators. It's fascinating stuff. The Carathian fled. The door hissed shut behind him. Marcus turned back to the classroom. Dozens of alien eyes stared at him in shock. He walked back to his seat, sat down, picked up his pencil, and resumed drawing his cat. Sorry about the interruption, Professor, he said. You were talking about the Thraken blood beast? I had a question about their hunting patterns. Professor Zixtar slowly emerged from under his desk. His translator made several false starts before managing words. That was an Imperial executor. Yeah, they're not as tough as they look, Marcus said. The Empire relies too much on reputation and fear. Once you get past that, they're just bullies with fancy gear. Now, about those hunting patterns? The Velkari student next to him hadn't moved away this time. Instead, she leaned closer, her crystalline form chiming with what might have been curiosity. You are not afraid? Marcus looked at her and smiled. Of Crex? Nah. I grew up in Australia. We had scarier things in our backyard. He paused. Though I probably should call the embassy. They get cranky when I don't report these things. These things? Another student squeaked. This has happened before? Oh yeah, third time this month. Different species each time, but same basic approach. Intimidation, threats, demanding I reveal human military secrets. Marcus shrugged. Gets old after a while. That's why I laughed. The whole dramatic entrance thing, very overdone. Professor Zixtar's optical stalks were fully extended now, fixed on Marcus. You are 16 cycles old, a juvenile by your species standards. 17, actually. Had my birthday last week. Marcus grinned. And yeah, I'm young for a human. That's why my parents sent me here. Figured it would be educational. Educational. the professor repeated faintly. Sure. Where else am I going to learn about xenobiology from actual xenos? Earth's great and all, but our alien studies programs are all theoretical. Here I get hands-on experience. A Rillan student raised a tentacle. But you are from a death world. Your planet has acid rain, extreme temperature variations, predators everywhere. It's not that bad, Marcus protested. I mean, sure, we have some dangerous animals. And yeah, the weather can be rough. And okay, Australia specifically has a lot of things that can kill you. But it's home, you know? You learn to adapt. Adapt, the Velkari student echoed. By becoming an apex predator yourself? Marcus considered this. I wouldn't say apex predator. Humans are more opportunistic. We're not the strongest or the fastest, but we're persistent, and we're really good at working together. That's our real strength. You did not work together just now, Professor Zixtar pointed out. You faced the executor alone. Because I didn't need help. If there had been 5 executors, or if they'd brought better weapons, I would have handled it differently. Probably would have tried talking first, maybe set up some distractions. Humans are good at improvising. The classroom slowly returned to something resembling normal. Students returned to their seats, though many kept glancing at Marcus. Professor Zixtar attempted to resume his lecture, but his hearts weren't in it. Marcus noticed the distraction. Professor, maybe we could talk about Earth predators for a bit, since everyone seems curious. I could tell you about drop bears. Drop bears? Several students asked in unison. Marcus grinned. Oh yeah, carnivorous koalas that drop from trees onto unsuspecting prey. Very dangerous. Tourists never see them coming. He kept a straight face as he spun the tale, watching his classmates lean in with fascination. The Velkari student beside him chimed softly. Laughter, he realized. You are lying, she said. There are no drop bears. How do you know? Marcus asked innocently. Because I researched Earth fauna extensively before you arrived. I wanted to understand what kind of creature would come from such a world. And what did you conclude? The Velkari's form shifted, creating what might have been a smile. That humans are far stranger than any of your predators. Marcus laughed again, the sound filling the classroom. This time nobody flinched. Professor Zixtar cleared his primary throat. Perhaps, Mr. Chen, you would be willing to give a presentation on Earth's ecosystem next class, from a native's perspective. Sure, Marcus agreed. But I warn you, I'm going to include the drop bears. The class ended with something unprecedented in the Galactic Academy's history. Laughter shared between species, with a human Deathworlder at the center of it all. As students filed out, the Velkari paused beside Marcus. I am Silvar. Perhaps we could study together? I would like to learn more about your world. Marcus smiled. I'd like that. Fair warning, though, I might actually teach you about drop bears. Silvar's chimes were definitely laughter now. I will take that risk. As they left the classroom together, Marcus reflected on the day's events. 3 months of isolation ended by an attempted kidnapping. It was almost poetic in a twisted sort of way. The executor had meant to use fear to control him. Instead, his attack had shown the other students that the human wasn't the monster they should fear. He was just another student, trying to learn, trying to fit in. A student who happened to come from a world where survival required a particular set of skills. Skills that made him laugh when others would cry, fight when others would flee, and find humor in the darkest situations. The human Deathworlder had laughed, and in doing so, had finally found his place among the stars. 3 weeks had passed since the Executor incident. Marcus Chen had become something of a legend at the Galactic Academy, though not in the way he'd hoped when he first arrived. The human who laughed at danger, the Deathworlder who made jokes while disarming trained killers, the student who talked about fictional drop bears with the same casualness others discussed the weather. He sat in the Academy's library with Silvar, surrounded by holographic texts on comparative biology. The Velkari had become his study partner and, surprisingly, his first real friend among the stars. "This makes no sense," Silvar chimed, her crystalline form flickering with frustration. "According to this text, humans can survive injuries that would kill most sapients instantly. But you claim you're fragile?" Marcus looked up from his notebook where he'd been sketching the anatomy of various species. "We are fragile. We just have different breaking points. A Borth can survive in acids that would dissolve me in seconds. A Thrakon can withstand pressure that would crush my bones, but put a hole in them, and they die quickly. Humans? We can sometimes survive with holes in us. It's weird, I know." "Everything about your species is weird," Silvar said, but her tones carried affection. "You leak salt water when hot, consume poisons for recreation, and your young play games that simulate combat. When you put it like that, we do sound pretty strange." Marcus grinned. "But hey, at least we're consistent. Consistently weird." A shadow fell across their table. Marcus looked up to see a group of senior students, 2 Korathians, a Zelanian, and what looked like a Vorthon. They did not look friendly. "Human," the lead Korathian said. His environmental suit bore academic insignia rather than military ones, but his posture screamed aggression. "You humiliated the Empire." Marcus set down his pencil slowly. "If you're talking about Executor Krex, he humiliated himself. I just helped him realize it." "You will pay for your disrespect." Silvar's form began to resonate, a sign of distress. Marcus placed a hand on what might have been her shoulder, the gesture careful not to hurt her fragile, crystalline structure. "Look," Marcus said calmly, "I get it. Pride, honor, all that. But we're in a library. People are trying to study. How about we take this discussion somewhere else?" "There will be no discussion," the Zelanian hissed, its psychic tendrils starting to glow. "Only correction." Marcus sighed and closed his notebook. "Silvar, remember what I taught you about situational awareness? Always know your exits, never let anyone box you in, and something about high ground," she recited. "Good student." Marcus stood slowly. "Also, remember what I said about psychological warfare? That sometimes the best weapon is making your enemy overthink." "Exactly." Marcus smiled at the group of aggressors. "Did you know that human saliva contains over 600 different types of bacteria? Our mouths are basically biological weapon factories. One bite from a human can cause infections that most species have no immunity to." The Korathians took an involuntary step back. "Of course," Marcus continued conversationally, "I'm not going to bite anyone. That would be unsanitary, and against Academy rules. Plus, I just had lunch, and the cafeteria's attempt at human food left me with garlic breath. Do you know what garlic does to a Zelanian's psychic receptors?" The Zelanian's tendrils retracted slightly. "But hey, you 4 seem determined to start something. So let me ask you a question. Do you know why humans are really classified as Deathworlders? It's not our strength or our resilience. It's our persistence. We're pursuit predators. We don't kill our prey quickly. We chase it. For hours. Days if necessary. We just keep coming." Marcus took a single step forward. All 4 aggressors stepped back. "Now imagine being hunted by something that never stops. Never tires. Just follows you, patient and relentless. That's what you're signing up for if you start this fight. I won't hurt you today, but I'll remember you, and every day you'll wonder when I'm coming. Every shadow could be me, every unexpected sound, every—" "Enough!" the lead Korathian's voice cracked. This is not over, human." "It never is," Marcus agreed pleasantly. "That's the point. Have a nice day, gentlemen." The group retreated, trying to maintain dignity, but moving with unseemly haste. Marcus sat back down and opened his notebook. You were bluffing, Silvar said after a moment. Completely. I can barely remember what I had for breakfast, let alone hold a grudge that long. But they don't know that. The bacteria in your saliva? Oh, that part's true. Human bites are nasty. My little sister bit me once when we were kids. Needed antibiotics for a week. Silvar's chimes sounded like disbelief. Your own siblings attack you with biological warfare? Only when I ate the last cookie. Marcus grinned at her expression. I'm kidding. Mostly. Siblings on Earth have a complicated relationship. We protect each other from outsiders, but fight constantly among ourselves. It's good training. Training for what? Life, I guess. Earth's not easy, even for humans. We learn early to stand up for ourselves, to fight when necessary, but also when to use words instead of fists. Those guys? They expected me to either cower or attack. Instead, I gave them something to think about. You gave them nightmares, Silvar corrected. I have studied human persistence hunting. It is terrifying. Yeah, but they don't need to know I'd rather spend my time drawing than stalking anyone. Marcus showed her his latest sketch, a detailed anatomical drawing of a Velkari's crystal structure. Speaking of which, is this accurate? I wasn't sure about the refraction patterns in your lower segments. Silvar studied the drawing, her form shifting through several color spectrums. This is remarkably accurate. How did you observe such detail? You hum different frequencies when you're thinking versus when you're emotional. The crystals resonate differently. I just paid attention. Marcus shrugged. It's beautiful, actually, like living music. If Velkari could blush, Silvar would have been crimson. You find my species beautiful? Are you kidding? You're basically living gems that sing. On Earth, people would pay millions just to see someone like you, though they'd probably try to put you in a museum, which would be rude. Their conversation was interrupted by an alarm, not the standard academy chimes, but something harsh and urgent. Emergency lights bathed the library in pulsing red. Attention all students, the overhead speaker crackled. Report to designated shelter areas immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Marcus was already moving, grabbing his belongings and Silvar's study materials. Come on, that's pattern 3 alarm. Something's wrong with the environmental systems. How do you know the alarm patterns? Silvar asked, following him through the suddenly crowded corridors. First thing I did when I got here was memorize the emergency procedures. Earth habit. Always know what can go wrong and how to respond. They reached the shelter area to find chaos. Students pressed against the sealed doors, panic spreading like wildfire. The environmental system failure meant different things to different species. For some, it was uncomfortable. For others, potentially lethal. Marcus scanned the crowd and spotted the problem immediately. A young Borth student was starting to literally come apart, their gelatinous form unable to maintain cohesion in the fluctuating atmospheric pressure. Without hesitation, Marcus pushed through the crowd. Move! Let me through! He reached the Borth and immediately assessed the situation. Okay, buddy. I need you to focus. What's your optimal pressure? 4.7 atmospheres, the Borth gurgled. But the shelter is only rated for... Don't worry about that. Marcus was already pulling items from his backpack. Emergency tape, a portable atmospheric sensor he'd modified, and something that looked suspiciously like a Earth-made pressure suit designed for a child. Silvar, I need you to resonate at frequency 440 Hz. Steady pulse. What? Why? Trust me, it'll help them maintain molecular cohesion. As Silvar began to resonate, Marcus worked with practiced efficiency. He created a makeshift pressure envelope around the Borth using the emergency tape and the pressure suit as a framework. Other students watched in amazement as the human worked, his movements precise despite the chaos around them. There. Marcus said after a few minutes. "It's not pretty, but it'll hold until the emergency teams arrive. Just don't move too much, okay?" The Borth's form had stabilized. You saved me. But how did you know? Humans are basically walking bags of fluid too, Marcus said. We just have skin holding us together. I figured the principle would be similar. Plus, I've been reading about Borth physiology. Fascinating stuff. Professor Zixtar appeared, his optical stalks swiveling frantically. "Mr. Chen, what have you... By the seven suns, you've created a pressure suit from spare parts?" "It's temporary," Marcus said modestly, "but it should hold for a few hours." "The emergency teams are 20 minutes away," the professor said faintly. "You may have just saved student Gloop's life." "Gloop," Marcus looked at the Borth. "Your name is Gloop?" "It sounds better in my language," Gloop burbled. Around them, the panic had subsided. Students watched Marcus with expressions ranging from awe to confusion. The human Deathworlder, the one they'd feared, had just risked his own safety to save one of the most vulnerable students in the academy. "Why?" a Carathian student asked. Not one of the aggressors from earlier, but younger, genuinely curious. "The Borth are not allies to Earth. You gain nothing from this." Marcus looked genuinely puzzled by the question. "They needed help. I could help. What else was I supposed to do?" "Most would have ensured their own safety first," the Carathian said. "Yeah, well, humans are stupid like that," Marcus said with a self-deprecating grin. "We see someone in trouble, and our first instinct is to help. It's gotten us in trouble more times than I can count. But it's also why we made it off our death world. We're really, really good at keeping each other alive." The emergency teams arrived 15 minutes later, finding the crisis largely contained. The Borth student was transferred to proper medical care, but the emergency modifications Marcus had made were so effective that the medical team asked for his notes. As the all-clear sounded and students began returning to their normal activities, Silvar chimed softly beside Marcus. "You constantly surprise me." "How so?" "You threatened 4 students with psychological warfare, then risked yourself to save someone you had never met. You carry emergency equipment for species whose biology you have only studied in texts. You are a living contradiction." Marcus considered this as they walked back toward the library. "Not really. Both actions came from the same place. I don't like seeing people hurt others, and I don't like seeing others hurt. Pretty simple, really." "Simple," Silvar repeated. "Nothing about you is simple, Marcus Chen." They found their table still vacant, their study materials undisturbed. As they settled back in, other students began approaching, not with fear or aggression, but with questions. How had he known what to do? Where had he learned field medicine for non-human species? Did all humans carry emergency supplies? Marcus answered patiently, sketching diagrams and explaining his reasoning. Without realizing it, he had begun teaching. The human Deathworlder, sharing survival knowledge with species from across the galaxy. "On Earth," he explained to his impromptu audience, "we have a saying, knowledge is power. But knowledge shared is power multiplied. My parents taught me that being strong isn't just about fighting. It's about building others up, making sure everyone gets home safe." A Rillan student raised a tentacle. "But Earth is dangerous. Why share knowledge that could be used against you?" "Because the alternative is letting fear win," Marcus said. "And if there's one thing humans are really bad at, it's letting fear make our decisions for us. We're too stubborn for that." As the study session continued, drawing more students into discussions of emergency procedures and cross-species first aid, Silvar watched Marcus with new understanding. The human's strength wasn't in his dense muscles or his ability to survive injuries. It was in his refusal to let the darkness of the universe dim his light. He had walked into their classroom as a curiosity, a Deathworlder to be feared. But he was transforming before their eyes into something else entirely. A teacher, a protector, a friend. And when the next threat came, because in a galaxy full of predators, there was always a next threat, he would face it the same way he faced everything else, with laughter, with cleverness, and with an absolutely infuriating refusal to be what others expected him to be. The human Deathworlder had laughed at death, but more importantly, he had chosen life. And in doing so, he was teaching an entire academy that sometimes the most powerful thing in the universe isn't the ability to destroy. It's the ability to preserve, to protect, and to persist. Even if you're just a 17-year-old kid from Australia with a backpack full of emergency supplies and a head full of impossible ideas. The Academy's Grand Assembly Hall had never hosted an event quite like this. What had started as Marcus Chen's simple presentation on Earth ecosystems had evolved into something unprecedented. The first Interspecies Survival Symposium. Representatives from 50 different worlds filled the amphitheater, all eager to learn from the human Deathworlder who had become the Academy's most unlikely celebrity. Marcus stood at the podium, feeling somewhat overwhelmed. In the audience, he could see Silvar's crystalline form glowing with what he'd learned was pride. Gloop occupied a specially modified seat, their gelatinous forms still held together by an improved version of Marcus's emergency pressure suit. Even Professor Zixtar was there, all 4 optical stalks focused intently on his human student. "So," Marcus began, his voice carrying through the hall's acoustic system, "everyone wants to know about Deathworlders, about humans, about how we survive on a planet that's trying to kill us every day. The truth is simpler than you might think. We don't survive despite our world's dangers. We survive because of them." He clicked a control, and a holographic image of Earth appeared above the stage. Beautiful and blue, deceptively peaceful from space. "This is Earth. Gravity 1.0 standard, which I know sounds horrible to most of you. Oxidizing atmosphere that's basically corrosive. Weather systems that can level cities. Tectonic activity that reshapes continents. And that's before we get to the life forms." The image zoomed in, showing various Earth creatures. Everything on Earth evolved in competition. Plants developed poisons. Herbivores developed immunity. Predators developed better ways to hunt. Prey developed better ways to hide. And humans? He grinned. "We developed something else entirely. We developed culture." A murmur ran through the audience. This wasn't what they'd expected. "See, we're not the strongest species on Earth, not even close. A gorilla could tear me apart. We're not the fastest. A house cat could outrun me in a sprint. We can't fly, we can't breathe underwater, we don't have natural weapons. What we have is this." He tapped his temple. "And more importantly, we have each other." The presentation continued, showing early human settlements, the development of tools, the formation of communities. Every species here has intelligence. That's not what makes humans unique. What makes us unique is that we're absolutely terrible at being alone. We need each other, and that need made us strong. A Thrakon in the audience raised an armored appendage. "But you threatened multiple aggressors alone. You fought an executor single-handedly." "Because I knew I wasn't really alone," Marcus explained. "I had the Academy's rules protecting me. I had the knowledge that my actions would be reported. I had backup, even if it wasn't physically present. Humans rarely act in true isolation. Even when we're alone, we carry our communities with us, their lessons, their strength, their judgment." He shifted the presentation to show various human emergency responses. "This is why humans are so obsessed with saving each other, why we'll risk ourselves for strangers. It's not nobility or heroism, it's survival instinct. Every human we save is someone who might save us someday. Every life preserved strengthens the whole." "But you saved Gloop," a Borth student called out. "They could never save you in return. Our species is too fragile." Marcus smiled. "Could you? Gloop, Remember when you helped me understand fluid dynamics for our physics exam? You saved my grade. That counts. Gloop's form rippled with emotion. That's the thing about humans, Marcus continued. We don't measure survival in purely physical terms. Knowledge is survival. Friendship is survival. Art, music, stories, they're all survival tools. They bind us together, make us more than the sum of our parts. The presentation was interrupted by alarms, not the Academy's standard alerts, but something deeper, more ominous. Security alerts. The main screen flickered and changed, showing multiple ships approaching the Academy. Carathian military vessels, but wrong somehow. Their markings were off, their energy signatures aggressive. "Attention, Galactic Academy," a harsh voice echoed through the hall. "This is Commander Vrex of the True Empire. We reject the weakness of integration. We come to reclaim our lost honor and purge the contamination of inferior species. Surrender the human Deathworlder or face annihilation." Panic erupted. Students scrambled for exits, but the security protocols had sealed the hall. It was meant to protect them, but now it trapped them. Marcus looked at the screen, then at the terrified faces around him. He saw Silvar's form flickering with fear, Gloop starting to destabilize, Professor Zixtar's eye stalks retracting. His new friends, his found family among the stars. He laughed. Not the confident laugh from the classroom months ago, but something different, warmer, protective. "Silvar," he called out, his voice cutting through the panic. "Remember our emergency drills?" The Velkari's form steadied slightly. "Pattern 7 response?" "Exactly. Gloop, I need you to flow into the ventilation system. You're our communications network now. Can you do that?" Yes." Marcus jumped down from the podium, moving through the crowd with purpose. "Listen up, everyone. I know you're scared. That's normal. But we're not helpless. Every species here has survived their own world. You all have strengths. Time to use them." He reached a group of Thraken students. "You guys have the strongest natural armor here. I need you at the main entrance. Not to fight, to be shields. Can you do that?" They looked at each other, then nodded. "Rillan students, your tentacles are incredibly sensitive to vibration. I need you spread out, feeling for any breaches in the hull. You're our early warning system." "But we're not warriors," one protested. "Neither am I," Marcus said. "But we're survivors. That's better." He continued through the room, organizing, delegating, turning panic into purpose. The Zelanian students, with their psychic abilities, became coordinators, linking groups mentally. The Carathian students, even those who had threatened him weeks before, offered their knowledge of their own people's tactics. Within minutes, the panicked mob had become something else, not an army, but a community, working together, covering each other's weaknesses. Professor Zixtar approached Marcus. "What are you planning, Mr. Chen?" "The same thing humans always do when outnumbered and outgunned," Marcus said, pulling out his ever-present notebook. "We cheat," he sketched quickly, showing the professor. "The true Empire expects us to cower or fight on their terms. But look at the Academy's design. It's built to accommodate hundreds of different species. That means thousands of different environmental zones," Zixtar finished, his eye stalks extending with understanding. "Each can be controlled independently." "Exactly. We can't win a straight fight. But we can make their victory extremely uncomfortable." The main doors shuddered under impact. The true Empire forces were breaching. "Places, everyone!" Marcus shouted. "Remember, we're not trying to be heroes. We're trying to survive and protect each other. Humans have a saying, no one wins a war. Someone just loses less. Let's make sure that someone is them." The doors burst open. Carathian soldiers in combat armor stormed in, weapons raised. They expected to find cowering students or futile resistance. Instead, they found Marcus Chen standing alone in the center of the hall, hands raised, smiling. "Commander Vrex, I presume? Bit dramatic with the entrance, don't you think?" The lead soldier removed his helmet, revealing scarred features twisted with hate. "You mock us even now, Deathworlder?" "Not mocking, just observing. You brought what, 50 soldiers? To capture one teenager? I'm flattered, really." "You have corrupted our people with your weakness," Vrex snarled, "teaching them to cower, to cooperate with lesser beings." "Funny thing about that word lesser," Marcus said conversationally. Behind him, barely visible, his organized students waited for their signals. "It assumes you know how to measure worth. Let me ask you something, Commander. What's the optimal temperature for a Carathian?" "What?" "Simple question. What temperature do you prefer?" 15 degrees standard. What does—" Marcus snapped his fingers. The environmental controls responded instantly. The temperature in the main entrance plummeted to below freezing. The Carathian soldiers, dependent on their environmental suits, suddenly found those suits struggling to compensate. "Oops," Marcus said. "That's Earth-winter temperature. Bit chilly for you?" Vrex raised his weapon, but his movements were already sluggish. Around the room, other systems activated. Gravity increased in some sections, decreased in others. Humidity levels fluctuated wildly. The lighting cycled through spectrums that some species couldn't see, but others found blinding. "See? Here's what you didn't understand," Marcus said, walking slowly around the shivering commander. "This isn't about strength. It's about adaptation. And thanks to all my friends here, we know exactly what conditions each of you can't handle." The true Empire soldiers were struggling now. Those in high-gravity sections could barely move. Others found themselves in atmospheres that, while not lethal, were deeply uncomfortable. A few had wandered into sections where Silvar and other Velkari were generating resonance frequencies that interfered with their equipment. You fight without honor," Vrex gasped. "I'm not fighting at all," Marcus corrected. "I'm surviving. My friends are surviving. Together." Through the chaos, security forces arrived. Proper Academy security, alerted by Gloop's messages through the ventilation system. The true Empire forces, already disadvantaged and disorganized, surrendered quickly. As Vrex was led away, he stared at Marcus with something between hatred and bewilderment. "You are just one human, a child. How?" Marcus gestured to the assembled students, now emerging from their positions. "That's where you're wrong. I'm not just one human. I'm one human with 50 different species worth of friends. Each one taught me something. Each one made me stronger. And together, we're unstoppable." The aftermath was chaotic but joyful. Students who had never spoken to each other were now bonded by shared survival. The Thraken, who had threatened Marcus weeks ago, clasped his shoulder with surprising gentleness. "I understand now," the Thraken said, "why humans are feared. Not for your individual strength, but for this. You make others strong." "We try," Marcus said. "It doesn't always work. But when it does—" He looked around at the diverse group, all supporting each other, checking for injuries, sharing in the relief. "When it does, it's beautiful." Silvar approached, her crystalline form resonating with complex harmonies. "You could have negotiated, could have gone with them to protect us." "Never crossed my mind," Marcus admitted. "You're my friends. Humans don't abandon friends. It's like genetically hardwired or something. Plus, you all did the hard work. I just pointed you in the right direction. You taught us to work together, dozens of species with nothing in common but fear, and you made us a unit." "Nah," Marcus said with a grin. "You already had something in common. You all wanted to survive. I just reminded you that it's easier together than alone." Professor Zixtar approached, all 4 eye stalks focused on Marcus with an expression that might have been paternal pride. "Mr. Chen, I believe your presentation was interrupted. Would you care to finish?" Marcus looked at the assembly hall, now scarred by conflict but filled with a new energy. Students from dozens of worlds mingled freely, barriers broken by shared experience. "I think the presentation finished itself," he said, "but if I had to summarize, humans aren't special because we're from a death world. We're special because we refuse to let that define us. We chose cooperation over competition, community over isolation, and we're absolutely convinced that anyone else can do the same no matter what world they're from." He paused, then added with a grin, "Plus, we're really good at improvising when things go wrong. That helps too." The room filled with laughter, not just human laughter, but the various sounds of joy from across the galaxy. Chimes and whistles, rumbles and clicks, all expressing the same fundamental emotion: relief, joy, connection. Later, as the Academy worked to repair the damage and process the day's events, Marcus sat with his usual study group, now expanded to include dozens of students. They weren't studying xenobiology or comparative anatomy. They were simply talking, sharing stories of their worlds, their fears, their hopes. "You know what the funny thing is?" Marcus said during a lull in conversation. "Back on Earth, I was just another kid. Nothing special. But out here, being human means something different. It means being the one who looks at impossible odds and says, 'Yeah, we can work with this.' Is that not exhausting?" asked a newer addition to the group, a delicate creature from a low-gravity world. "Sometimes," Marcus admitted, "but it's worth it. Every time someone realizes they're stronger than they thought, every time we turn fear into friendship, it's worth it." Silvar chimed softly. "You have changed us, Marcus Chen. The Academy will never be the same." "Good," Marcus said. "It was too quiet anyway, though I could do with fewer people trying to kidnap or kill me. Maybe limit it to once a month?" The group laughed, and Marcus leaned back, content. He'd come to the Galactic Academy as a curiosity, a Deathworlder among civilized species, but he'd found something he hadn't expected. Not just acceptance, but purpose. He was a human among the stars, and he had work to do. Not conquering or dominating, but building, teaching, connecting, showing a galaxy full of predators and prey that there was another way to survive, together. The human Deathworlder had walked into class and laughed at death, but more importantly, he'd taught others to laugh with him. And in a universe full of darkness, that laughter was the brightest light of all. As the study session continued into the night, Marcus pulled out his notebook and began sketching again. This time, it wasn't anatomy or emergency procedures. It was his friends, all of them, together. A family forged not by blood or planet of origin, but by choice. On Earth, they had a word for that. They called it humanity, and Marcus Chen was teaching it to the stars, one laugh at a time.